Welcome back everyone to another video, and today we have a very interesting video to do. And so I was thinking about this and how I wanted to really format this video, but basically I want to go back and react to the tier list I made ranking all of the teams going into this past NFL season, and I wanted to react to them, own up to some of my bad takes, give us a little pat on the back, I guess, the ones I got right, just that kind of thing. I'm actually going to score basically every single pick is worth 1 point, so 32 points for 32 teams. And at the end, we're going to calculate what percent I actually got right for last season. And so at first, I was going to just do like a typical reaction thing and have it so that I'm just sitting here watching one of my other videos. But I don't know. I didn't want it to be like that as far as me just like you guys just watching me watch something. I mean, no, I know a lot of people do that. No disrespect or anything. It's a fine form of content. It's just like, I don't think it's the best way to do this because of the amount of talking I did in the previous one. I don't want it to be a super long video. At least, because it'd be like double the length, and that's like well over an hour. Like, I don't want it to be anything like that. So basically, this is the finished tier list that I made last July for the 2023 to 2024 NFL season. And so I want to react to this before making, the 2024 to 2025 one I'm going to be doing later on this off season. And let's see how well I did. So starting off, I'm basically going to, oh yeah, I didn't even say the whole point. Oops. So the way I decided to officially format this video is I am going to obviously start from, we'll go from the bottom to the top, I guess. And I am going to obviously show what I said in the previous video, then cut back to me now, basically, knowing what happened, and we'll score based off that. So first, let's start with the Buccaneers and let's see what I said about them going into last season. Have you guys seen the video of Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask having their QB battle? Because the only battle going on was who can complete a pass first. It's an embarrassing video. I'm not gonna lie. And I'm going to kind of, throw some shade because I don't like the Buccaneers. I'm sure Buccaneers fans are going to throw shade at me too, because I'm a Panthers fan. I think the Buccaneers are going to be very bottom of the division. Unfortunately, though, if they actually end up landing Caleb Williams, might be good the following year, which I'm not going to think about right now, but I'm putting them down that bad. So obviously, that didn't age well. You could even say it's pretty ironic because I kind of described what ended up happening for the Panthers last season. That's obviously incorrect. That's not going to be a point. The Buccaneers had, a lot of success last year. I'm very happy for them. I like Baker. I was honestly kind of rooting for Baker, even though as a football fan, not a fan of the Panthers, but as a football fan, I was rooting for Baker. Good for the Buccaneers. I may have been too low on them compared to everybody else. They definitely were not projected to go to the divisional round last year, though. That was a big surprise. Good on them. Proved a lot of people wrong, including myself. On to the next one. And I'm putting the Cardinals down there as well. Speaking of the Cardinals have, and I talked about this in the Kyler Murray video I did, they have a lot going against them. Kyler Murray's out for a few weeks in the season. You don't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore. You have a new head coach, which, hopefully for the best. You don't have J.J. Watt anymore. You don't have Byron Murphy anymore. It's not looking good. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not looking good. And so I'm not going to be too hard on myself here because, again, yeah, the Cardinals, they didn't have a lot going for them. Kyler was hurt for majority of the year. They didn't have a whole lot on paper anyways. This is a weird one because technically they were 5 to 7 wins-ish. They were just a game below 5 and ish. It's kind of around that area, so I can count games or teams that had 8 wins or 4 wins. But to be fair, they also were one of the worst teams in the NFL. So what we'll do for teams like this that land on the bubble, we'll call it, is by the end of this video, if I have a lot correct, we'll count that as wrong. And if I have not a lot correct, we'll count that as right to kind of help the score, I guess, kind of even out or whatever. They have Aaron Donald. That's really it on defense. They don't have Jalen Ramsey anymore. So it's looking very tough for the Rams. You do have Matthew Stafford back in healthy, and you have Cooper Kupp. But man, other than that, Cam Akers, I guess, it's rough for LA. I think it's going to be a very hard year for them. So they're going to go in the Caleb Williams tier. And yeah, the Rams, that was also not totally accurate. To be fair, I do think this was a fairly average take on the Rams at this point in the year. Maybe it was too much of a casual take. Maybe like a little bit. But when you have guys like Puka Nacua step up and Kyren Williams, that offense had a major boost. I was overall pretty low on Matthew Stafford going to last year as well, just because I wasn't thrilled with his injuries. And just the Rams, looking pretty depleted. But you know what? Again, they proved me wrong. I think they proved a lot of people wrong, to be honest. But yeah, so not one of my better takes, but honestly, the Rams are a very likable team in my opinion. I love Puka Nacua, I like Kyren Williams, I like Cooper Kupp. I think they're a pretty cool team, so good on them. Barely make slash miss playoffs, I think is probably their ceiling. But in my opinion, they're going to be about 5 to 7 wins ish. I think it's definitely going to be a step up from next year, but it just doesn't all happen overnight. You have to have a few seasons of building that up, building up momentum, filling up those holes in the roster. I love Justin Fields, obviously, and them getting DJ Moore is just, finally true wide receiver number one. A proven receiver. Moore gets a great quarterback with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields gets a little bit too much hate. I think he's just kind of scratching the surface of what he can be. So I'm a big fan of him, what he can do. But I do think 5 to 7 wins is probably where the Bears are going to fall next year. Now, this is one I definitely got right. I said 5 to 7 wins on I think I even said the higher end of that. They got 7 wins. And I'm pretty proud of this pick because I actually saw a lot of people being very, very high in the Bears, like 10 wins, all that kind of stuff because they got DJ Moore. And, I'm across the board, I'm usually pretty conservative when it comes to whenever, new players move on to teams like that and people start, kind of putting a lot of stock into it because it doesn't always work out the way you thought. Now, with that said, I did think DJ Moore was going to make Fields a lot better. I said that in the video. I just wasn't totally sold as it all coming together in 1 year. And to be honest, I do wish Fields had more time to be with DJ Moore because I think it would have been a lot better going forward for the Bears as a whole. But I understand taking Caleb Williams. But yeah, so this one definitely counts. Got 7 wins there. And, Bears, I think, you're trending upwards. It just wasn't last season that was going to be a 10-win season. But this season, I'll say that for my prediction video coming up, but, it could be 10 wins. That's all I'm saying. Broncos are a very tough team for me to rank, in my opinion, because I want to put them in barely make slash miss playoffs with a huge Russ bounce back year, but it's just not realistic, in my opinion. It's just not. The AFC's too loaded. You have an extremely competitive divisions like the AFC North with the Bengals and the Steelers and the Rams and the Browns, and you have divisions like the one they're in with the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Raiders and the Broncos. In my opinion, it's just not going to be close to that playoff push. I just don't think it's going to happen. So in my opinion, I do think they look better than last year, but they just have too much going against them as far as other teams to compete with. I think their defense is phenomenal. I do think Russ will bounce back, but I think it's just very unfortunate outside circumstances with their strength of division, and it's going to be tough. So I'm going to say probably around just 5 to 7 wins for the Broncos, but definitely an improvement from last year. This will also be one of those bubble teams, we'll call it, because they did get 8 wins, which technically they kind of did barely miss the playoffs, but they also were kind of right there with 5 to 7 wins. I was kind of in the video, I talked about Russell Wilson having a bounce back year, not being sold on it, and that's kind of how I was during the entire season, to be honest. I was never really leaning one way or another when it came to the Broncos. They'd have some nice flashes, and they'd lose by 50 points to the Dolphins. So it was just one of those years. All around, it was just not a good year. I think you definitely improved, and it was better than the previous year, but it showed you had to move on from Russell Wilson, and that includes taking a lot of money and just throwing it at him to not be on the team, which sucks. But yeah, it is what it is. Broncos, though, that'll be a bubble team. The Colts are a more exciting team to talk about because they have Anthony Richardson, because he has all of the physical attributes to be an incredible quarterback in the league. You have a new head coach who is coming over from the Eagles, who helped even coach up Jalen Hurts, and look how much he's improved. So I think it's definitely possible. You have Michael Pittman. You drafted Josh Downs out of North Carolina. I cannot remember their tight end's name for the life of me, so I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, you also have Jonathan Taylor, obviously, too. And honestly, I'm a big fan of that Colts offense. You lose Isaiah Rodgers and those guys for the whole gambling thing, which is, very annoying that you'd even risk that in the NFL with all the money you're already making. But definitely tough, and it's definitely a decent loss for them losing Isaiah Rodgers on defense. But I do think the Colts are going to be a pretty good team. They're not in the toughest division in the world, so a big leap could actually make them compete for first place with the Jaguars, in my opinion. So I am going to put the Colts in 5 to 7 wins. I think they'll be competitive and it'll be exciting, but not really make slash miss the playoffs. They're in the AFC. You got to be a lot better than that to almost get in there or even get in at all. Next is the Colts, and I was actually very, very wrong with the Colts, okay, because they, they're not in the 5 to 7 wins. They didn't make the playoffs. They got very, very close. But, they were actually pretty good, and that's without Anthony Richardson. I was really predicting this with Richardson in there. And to be honest, had he stayed healthy, they probably would have even been a game or two better than 9 wins, I feel like, because he was looking really, really good, at least in my opinion. But, Gardner Minshew kind of came in clutch for him. He was good down the stretch. And, yeah, it's good in the Colts. I got that one wrong, too. You have Devontae Adams, and he's going to have to carry that entire offense because you have him, you have Josh Jacobs. That's, in my opinion, that's about it. You have Jacoby Myers, who's a great wide receiver, too, but not enough to really, light it up constantly. So I think the Raiders offense will slightly be more efficient, but I don't think they have the defense to get stops. They'll need to stay in games, and I think 5 to 7 wins where they belong. They're in a tough division at that too. They got to play the Chiefs and Chargers and Broncos, so they're going to 5 to 7 wins. I'm not really sure what sold the Raiders and Jimmy Garoppolo. Personally, I was never very high on him, and they got around 8 wins. So, technically, again, could be like a bubble team, barely miss playoffs, but again, they are right around their 5 to 7 wins-ish. So, at the very least, if we don't count at the end, I did at least get that one accurate, and along with the Broncos and I can't remember the other team as well. This is Washington. Now, I like Washington a lot. You have Sam Howell, who I'm going to do a player prediction video on to finish the series, actually. And he's in a pretty good situation. You have to sit out a year, develop. He got in and even looked very promising then. And now he's coming in an offense where he has Terry McLaurin, he has Curtis Samuel, John Dotson, Brian Robinson as running back. I mean, that's very solid. You draft Emmanuel Forbes as your corner, who I think is going to help out the defense a lot. You hopefully have Chase Young coming back in his actual, full 100% healthy form. You could have a great year. But the only thing, in my opinion, going against Washington is their division. I'm honestly going to put them in 5 to 7 wins because spoiler alert, I guess, for the team prediction video, I see them getting around 7 wins. So I'm going to put them in there, but that's definitely the high end 5 to 7 wins. But I just think they have a lot going against them as far as their competition. I think they will be good, but not putting it all together in this coming season, in my opinion. I did say they'd be around 5 to 7 wins. They ended up getting 4. So again, I got this fairly accurate. Just might not count it in the end because of the scoring or whatever we're doing for the video. I was actually pretty confident in Sam Howell having a very good season. I think he did show flashes, but overall, they just didn't win a lot of games. Now you end up drafting somebody new. So, kind of funny, like, I thought certain players would do certain things. It just didn't really go that way, but they still kind of landed in the same spot anyway. So, yeah, that one's pretty accurate, but we'll have to see on the scoring at the end of the video. The Saints have a pretty good defense. They always seem to be very competitive that way. But, it's definitely kind of questionable now on offense because you have Alvin Kamara with his trial coming at some point, and I guess he can keep playing until then. I'm honestly not very sure. You have Derek Carr, though, who, look, division rival jokes aside, I think it was very mind-boggling to go get him, considering you shut him out last year. As the Saints, you held this guy to 0 points on the Raiders, and then thought to yourself, that's the guy we need. Like, come on. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I mean, I know it's a funny way of looking at it, but Derek Carr is a pretty average to below average QB, and that was not the answer in my opinion. It's just kind of putting a slight Band-Aid over the wound that is needing a serious quarterback. So maybe he makes it somewhat viable for a year or so, but Derek Carr is not going to be the long-time answer there, and I'm sure the Saints know that, but that was just not the move in my opinion. I'm going to give myself a little bit of slack here because at the time of recording that video, as you guys saw, Alvin Kamara had his whole legal situation going on, so I wasn't really sure how much he was actually going to play. With that said, though, I was still wrong. I thought 5 to 7 wins. They ended up getting 9. Derek Carr, I don't think was amazing, but he was good to give him 9 wins. And you know what? He was injured on and off too, just for the record. But I think I was pretty. I mean, we're gonna count this as incorrect. Don't get me wrong, but I was, I think, more wrong than I was accurate on this one at least. I will say though, I knew Alvin Kamara was gonna be a big difference maker, as most people do. He's an amazing player. So his suspension, he comes back from it and he's very, very good. It definitely helps him out. So that one's one of those things where I didn't totally know what I was going into because I didn't know how long he'd be out for. But regardless of that, I was still wrong. So yeah, that's another one wrong. It's a rough start, but I do think I got more of these right as we go on. But maybe I didn't. They're not gonna. You made some great moves, but you're not gonna go all of a sudden win the division and make the playoffs. In my opinion, it's just not realistic. But you draft C.J. Stroud. I think it's a great pick. You trade back-to-back picks to get Will Anderson. I mean, you draft Derek Stilling last year. You have a new defensive-minded head coach. it is all coming together for the Texans. I will say that. I think it really is all coming together. You're making a lot of the right moves, but once again, kind of like for the Bears, who's also in that tier, it just doesn't all happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one season. So I think they're going to stay in that 5 to 7 wins tier. But Texans, definitely, though, going to take a big step from last year for sure. You made some great moves, but you're just not going to, get a bunch of wins and go win the division or anything like that. I think is around what I said for the Texans, which is hilarious because that is literally exactly what they did. They did win the division after making some moves, and they did go to the playoffs. But again, I am fine with being around with this one because this was a really exciting point of the entire NFL season was CJ Stroud's rookie year. I was confident in Stroud. I really was. I was pretty consistent about that in my offseason videos. That I was confident in him, just not in year one. I thought it would come together as a bit of a slower process over the next couple seasons. Not being one of the best rookie quarterbacks, let me rephrase that. Not having one of the best rookie quarterback seasons ever, I think is the better way to phrase that, of what I was going to say. And, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I was obviously way off. Texans surprised a lot of people here, so I'm not going to pretend to be like, that was a terrible take that I had. I'm going to be honest. I think that was fairly accurate at that point in time. But Stroud just came out there and lit it up. Tank Dell lit it up. Dalton Schultz was good for him down the stretch. Nico Collins was amazing. That offense just so good. So yeah, Texans. I was wrong with that one. That's cool with me. Next is the Titans. The Titans, I think, are gonna go in the 5 to 7 wins. Honestly, I don't love the Well, I don't know. They could go and barely miss the playoffs though. No, okay. I'm gonna keep them there. I'm gonna keep them there at like 7 wins. Derrick Henry is at some point you would think Father Time is going to win because Derrick Henry is just defying all the kind of circumstances around running backs. Usually they slow down at this age. Oh, Derrick Henry's too big. His body's going to give up on this age. Not happening. But with the amount of workload that he does have to kind of carry every single year, he seriously, like, jokes aside, he can't keep doing that year after year. And you have to have other weapons, and I don't think you do. You have Treylon Burks, who looks good. But other than that, I don't know who else you really have. And the defense is very questionable as well. I don't like the Titans very much going into this year. I think it's going to be around the 7-win mark in that tier. Next is the Titans. This one I did get right. I said it'd be around the 5 to 7 win category, and I said 7 wins. I was one off. They got 6 wins. The Titans, it was about what I thought from this. It's about what I thought from them this year, to be honest. They didn't have a ton of weapons, and it kind of bit them in the butt throughout the whole year. Levis did play more, I think, than I was probably thinking at that point in time. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does this coming season. But overall, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate for the Texans. So they're right there, and we'll count that one as correct. I think the Browns are going to be up there. They had a sneaky good offseason with some big defensive additions. And, I mean, Nick Chubb now has the backfield all to himself. I honestly think it's probably for the better. He's absolutely incredible, and I think he will be a huge focus on that offense because he was kind of splitting carries with Kareem Hunt. Now it's just all him. Jerome Ford behind him. Deshaun Watson, they got Elijah Moore, they got Amari Cooper. They have a very good offense. I think they're going to be a threat, but again, a lot of competition around. I don't think they're as good as the competition above them, in my opinion. And again, this one is correct. They barely did make the playoffs. They didn't win the division, but they did get in the wild card. That's about what I was thinking for that tier, to be honest. It's funny because the Browns did do what I thought they would, just not at all by the means that I thought they would do to get there. Like, I was not thinking, oh, Watson's going to get hurt and Joe Flacco's going to come in a year where they have no Nick Chubb. That's not what I was thinking, but they still got in the same spot. So it's correct, but crazy year for the Browns. I hope Nick Chubb comes back really strong next year because, again, he went down, first, second game of the season. And the Browns, they found a way. They made it work. They had a great defense led by Myles Garrett, of course, and good offense, again, with their kind of quarterback carousel they had last year. But, yeah, that one's correct. I think the Chargers, especially Herbert, bounced back pretty well. You draft Quentin Johnson. And you still have Keenan Allen, you still have Mike Williams, and I think the defense is going to be back and more, obviously healthier, but I think they're also going to be just better than we were last year because injuries weighed them down so much. So I'm saying barely make playoffs for the Chargers. I think it's going to be a tough one because they play the Chiefs twice a year and the Raiders, which is pretty competitive sometimes. So I am going to say barely make the playoffs. I think it's going to be a good year for the Chargers, but, I don't want to say deep playoffs, to be honest. And then Chargers, again, this one's just kind of it is what it is. Like, I can't predict injuries. I didn't think Hurt would get hurt again. I don't predict anything. Whenever I do team predictions and season stuff, I'm never, keeping in mind someone getting hurt. Sure, I'll, take in a player's injury history into account when it's kind of applicable, but for Herbert, I thought he was going to bounce back. I wasn't too worried about it. He goes down again. Quentin Johnston was not the kind of weapon I thought he would be. And yeah, overall, it was just a disappointing year for the Chargers. So that one's incorrect. The Giants are in a very tough division. I am going to put them, though, in the barely make / miss playoffs because I think they are still a tier above the teams I've listed below them. You have Daniel Jones having a career year, actually looking very good, taking care of the football. You have Saquon Barkley, who I assume is coming back, even though he's not technically signed the extension or whatever. I couldn't see him leaving at this point in the offseason. So I'm just going to say you have Saquon Barkley. And then you also got Darren Waller. Huge addition in the offseason. I like that a lot for Daniel Jones. And then also bringing back Isaiah Hodgins. He actually looked very good the second half of the year, especially in the playoffs against the Vikings. So I like that a lot too. Kayvon Thibodeau looked great at second half of the year as a rookie. So I like the Giants a lot, honestly. But I think you have a lot of high competition. So barely make / miss playoffs for sure. It's going to be tough. But next is the Giants. And, you know, I really was in the mindset that this was not a fluke season 2 years ago, I guess. The past season at the time of, you know, recording the clip you just saw. But, you know, it just didn't work out for him. It was just injuries, and from the get-go, their season was not off to a good start with getting, shut out by the Cowboys week 1. You know, it is what it is. That one's wrong. I was wrong with the Giants. They were just not very good. I thought certain guys like Isaiah Hodgins would kind of step up and maybe keep developing after the year they just had. I thought Waller would be a bit of a threat maybe, and it just, you know, it just didn't go that way. So that one's wrong. This might be kind of like a hot take. I don't know. But in my opinion, I'm going to put the Jets and barely make the playoffs. Not miss, but barely make. I think while they are going to be good with Rodgers, I don't see this like Super Bowl caliber team all of a sudden, because Rodgers is incredible, but he's not like prime Rodgers. So I feel like the Jets might be getting slightly overrated, and I do feel bad for that, because then it's going to be the, you know, yearly clowning on the Jets for thinking they have a real chance, even though now I think it's very valid to think you do have a real chance. But in my opinion, you're in a very tough conference in the AFC, and you're also in a very tough division in the AFC. You have the Bills, the Patriots, and the Dolphins all twice a year. And I think to a certain degree, you're not going to have the best record. I mean, you can't win them all. I think you'll be much better than last year. The next is the Jets. And again, this is just kind of like the Herbert one. Rodgers goes down after like 52 seconds of playing. Can't predict that. It's wrong. It sucks, but yeah, that one's wrong. You know, again, it is what it is. And joining them and barely make the playoffs is the Lions. I think the Lions are going to finally make the playoffs. Unlike the AFC, they don't have as much competition with all these like loaded divisions in the NFC. So I think the Lions have a real chance of winning the division first off, or just sneaking into the wild card. I think it's very possible. Jared Goff actually looked very good last year. You have Jameson Williams missing 6 games, unfortunately, after just missing some of last season. Now he gets suspended for gambling, which is not ideal. But you still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you lose DeAndre Swift, but you bring in David Montgomery, and you draft Jahmyr Gibbs, who evidently is going to be a big part of that offense. And then you also, I cannot remember who I was about to say. Why can I not think of his name? I couldn't think of Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is now back in Detroit. That's who I couldn't think of. So you have him, and he's a very reliable veteran receiver too. So I like the Lions a lot. They have Aiden Hutchinson again on defense, and then you bring in Gardner Johnson from the Eagles. So next is the Lions, and I was wrong with the Lions in the best way possible, because they were way better than I thought they would be. I thought that they would, you know, kind of be in this category, but man, they were awesome. They were deep playoffs. Again, I had them here. That one's wrong. Good in the Lions, though. Really, really exciting season from them. This is going to be a big year for the Packers to kind of see what they have in Jordan Love as of right now. Not to say he can't improve, because I'm sure he will in the following years. This is his first year as a starter. But you are going to get a glimpse, and you will see flashes of what he can be. Obviously, you're hoping, you know, he's going to be a great quarterback. In my opinion, I actually did an individual video on Jordan Love. I think he will be very good. But, you know, putting it all together next year, make the playoffs, might be a little too much to ask. You have Christian Watson, though, who I think is going to be a very good receiver. Obviously, Jordan Love's #1 target. Still have Aaron Jones, still have A.J. Dillon. So you have reliable running backs if you need to kind of resort to the ground game more. And you always have a defense that's incredibly competitive. Quay Walker going into his second year looked very good last year too. So next is the Packers, and this one is correct. They did barely make the playoffs. And again, as I say in that clip, that I was very confident in Jordan Love, and I made a solo video on Jordan Love last season because I thought he was going to be pretty good. He was in a good offense. He'd sat for a year or two, which usually goes well for rookie quarterbacks. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I didn't think he'd be as good as he was, but he got very good over the course of last season. From week 1 to the playoffs, I mean, you really kind of almost beat the 49ers. I mean, it was very, very close. So, yeah, this one's definitely in there. I'm not really going to count that as deep playoffs because I do say at the beginning of that video that I was assuming deep playoffs was like NFC, AFC championship kind of tier. They didn't quite make it there, but still, very good season from them. They did get in. Honestly, I don't know. Barely make or miss the playoffs. I honestly have no idea. I just know they're going to go in that tier. They're going to be incredibly competitive because of their defense. You get Christian Gonzalez after trading back at 17. That is maybe the steal of the draft. I mean, I'm not sure how he fell that far. He looks like an immediate starter in camps, and I guess mini camp, training camp, in a few weeks. But I love the defense. Matthew Judon had a big year last year too. So Patriots defense, definitely incredible. The offense is where it's a little questionable. I think this is a very big year for Mac Jones as far as on the hot seat. I guess blame is the right word to use there. I didn't want to really say blame, but I mean, yeah, I guess he does deserve some of the blame there. But the coaching definitely deserves it because, I mean, you had a defensive coordinator calling offensive plays, and it was just like screen after screen, and then run on 3rd and 10, and punt the ball. That's all it was. Next, the Patriots, and I thought Mac Jones was gonna bounce back from the struggles due to his coaching. I thought the coaching change would help. It really didn't. Mac Jones played terrible. The coaching was terrible. His weapons weren't very good either. Just a recipe for disaster. And then even the Patriots defense, which I've been very high on for a couple of years now because they're just very good, don't get the credit that they deserve sometimes. Judon goes down for the year, and Christian Gonzalez, their star rookie corner, goes down for the year. So, yeah, it was pretty disappointing. That one's incorrect. The Falcons, here's the thing. This is the second NFC South team. The Buccaneers, in my opinion, are by far the worst team in there. But technically, you could put any NFC South team, except for the Buccaneers, in my opinion, in barely make/miss the playoffs because the division's so bad. But I think if I do that, it's going to make the entire tier list look very, weird with just, the Falcons and barely make/miss playoffs. Even though that's very realistic for the division, I just don't feel right about doing that. So I'm going to put them in the 5 to 7 wins. But just so everyone is aware, that division is so bad, that could very well be playoffs. Just so we're on the same page. I'm not hating. I just don't want to put them, with other teams that are actually in a tier above them just because that division's so bad. But to get to the Falcons for real, though, they get Jesse Bates in free agency. Absolutely huge addition for free safety. He's an incredible safety, and I think he's going to be a big piece of that defense, along with A.J. Terrell and Grady Jarrett. And I know they got someone else to help Grady Jarrett on the defensive line. I cannot remember what his name is. But then on offense, you obviously drop Bijan Robinson, who... pretty big draft pick right there. He's going 7th overall in fantasy drafts, even though he hasn't even touched the field yet as a rookie, which is insane. You have Desmond Ridder. You have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Allgeier's backup running back, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. The offense is looking good. I'm not going to lie. The offense is looking good. As a Panthers fan, I do not want to play the Falcons twice a year because that offense is going to be very good. I think the games against the Panthers, though, will be exciting because the Panthers do have a great defense. But Falcons, they're going to go in 5 to 7 wins-ish because I think that is what they're going to get. Could they get more because their division is so bad? For sure, but in my opinion, they're going to go in 5 to 7 wins. Next is the Falcons, and I was assuming the Falcons would be competing with the Panthers for the division. That was not the case. The Panthers were terrible. They were the joke of the league. Falcons, they did barely miss the playoffs, though. It was a tough division because all teams were pretty similar, again, except for the Panthers, who are by far the worst. But the Falcons, they do barely miss the playoffs. That one is correct. I've said it 1,000 times since last offseason. Ridder held this team back on the field, and he held them back from me projecting them to go further. And that was really the one thing holding me back. I love the look of the Falcons defense going into last season, and Ridder I couldn't be sold on Ridder. So, it sucks. But, yeah, that one is correct. In my opinion, I think the Panthers could very easily make the playoffs because that division is so bad. But to be fair to all the teams in that division, I'm just going to put them in 5 to 7 wins-ish. Once again, they could definitely get more than that, but I don't want to put them, up there. I just think that is kind of unfair because, obviously they're going to barely make the playoffs because their division is so bad. But the Panthers, I will say, in my opinion, even though I'm a fan, I do think they are the new best team in that division. I think their defense is the best team in that division. You have Brian Burns, you have J.C. Horn, you have Derek Brown. Jeremy Chin is now moving back from his free safety role to his hybrid safety kind of linebacker spot where he thrived his rookie year. So I like it a lot, honestly. I think their defense is going to be phenomenal. Offense is where it's a little questionable. You have Bryce Young, who in my opinion is going to be a good quarterback. I did a video on him. If you didn't see it, go check it out. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time defending that man. I already did, so go see if you want to watch that. But I think Bryce Young's going to be very good. You have Miles Sanders, who, again, like I said, I don't think is going to replicate what he just did the previous year, but I think he is still a very solid running back for them. And then you also have Terrace Marshall Jr., who, in my opinion, has major wide receiver 1 potential. He just needs more reps. He got some at the end of last year, and he proved that he can actually, really make an impact. So you have him. You draft Jonathan Mingo, who looks to be very good. And then you also have Adam Thielen and DJ Chark. So you have some wide receiver depth. It's just not the strongest in the league. But I do think you can't compete in that very sorry division that is the NFC South. You got Terrace Marshall Jr., major wide receiver 1 potential. You got Jonathan Mingo. I mean, what's not to love about the Panthers? How will they not be competing for first place in this division? Right, guys? Look, I will make jokes at division rivals. But when it comes to ranking things, I always try and be as absolutely unbiased as possible. And what you guys saw last year was probably a little bit of optimism, but I really did feel like, and I will say one thing: the Panthers are terrible, but what I said about their defense, that does stand. Their defense had a lot of injuries. J.C. Horn was down. Jeremy Chin didn't really play. I think he was injured throughout the season as well. Shaq Thompson went down for the whole season. I mean, they were still a pretty good defense. I'm not sure where they ended up actually ranking, but I want to say it was somewhere in the top 10. The Panthers defense was actually not terrible, especially with all the injuries going on. It was that offense that was a complete joke. But again, this is wrong. Bryce Young had no weapons. I thought Bryce Young would be better than what he was in year 1. Obviously, there's a lot of things that caused him to be that bad. I've been a Bryce Young believer since they drafted him, and if the Texans drafted Bryce Young, I would have been a believer in him as well. I think he was a good prospect. I think he has the skills. We saw flashes this past season, so I think he'll be a good quarterback. But yeah, as far as the analysis went for last season, it was off by just a little bit. So the Seahawks are gonna go and barely make the playoffs because I think last year they made it, and it was kind of clear they just weren't quite ready. They had a very, above their ceiling last year. I mean, I think people were projecting them to get, like, bottom of the league, and they made the playoffs. So I am going to put them back in the barely make the playoffs just because I don't see them making a deep playoff push. If you're thinking AFC Championship, I feel like that's just not gonna happen. So this one is correct. They did barely miss the playoffs. I thought Jackson Smith-Njigba was gonna be a bit of a bigger factor in year 1 than what he was. Not gonna say he's bad or anything like that. No, that's just for year 1. I think he's gonna be good going forward. I think I did underestimate Devin Witherspoon though by just a little bit because he was very, very good for Seattle. I mean, he was a young star of that defense. The Seahawks overall had a pretty solid season. They're in a very tough division. You got the 49ers in there. The Rams were very good as well. So, yeah, that one's pretty accurate, and that one we're going to count as correct, obviously. They did barely miss the playoffs. Next is the Steelers. Now, the Steelers are going to go and barely make / miss the playoffs. In my opinion, they barely missed the playoffs because, again, a lot of competition. I already have the Browns in there. You have Kenny Pickett, who I think improved a lot over last year, and I think he is in for a pretty good year this year. Najee Harris back and healthy with his foot issue, I would assume healed by now. George Pickens looked great. You have Deontay Johnson, who looked great, except for he couldn't find the end zone, which I think is definitely an anomaly. I couldn't say that for a second. Pat Freiermuth looked great too. So Steelers are going to go there, but again, they're in a very, very tough division to where, as incredible as that defense is with TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and all, and then you draft Joey Porter, as great as it is, that's just the level the AFC is on. Next is the Steelers, and this one is correct. They did barely make the playoffs. Sure, you lost first round to the Bills, but after the way that season looked at times, that's a win in my book. They looked very rough at times, and Mike Tomlin always just finds a way to will a team to finish over 500, and this time they got into the playoffs. So good in the Steelers. George Pickens, great young player, and yeah, that one counts as correct. Next is the Cowboys. So the Cowboys are going to go in deep playoffs. I think that's just where they belong most years because they are a good team, but they're just never good enough to make the next step and actually get to the Super Bowl. They're just never able to do it. Dak gets a lot of hate. Some of it's deserved, some of it's probably not, but he does collapse a lot. But on the bright side, you have an incredible defense, one of, if not the best in the league. Definitely there's a case for the best in the league. And now you get Stephon Gilmore too. Only out of the secondary, great pickup. CeeDee Lamb in offense, obviously amazing. And I also like that Tony Pollard is now the lead back. I think he's going to be a lot more dynamic than Zeke. Next to the Cowboys, and look, this one's incorrect, but I do feel that I predicted this correctly. I mean, why did the Cowboys not make it further in the playoffs? Like, I don't understand. And I've said before in my videos that Dak a lot of times holds me back. He's not usually a playoff riser by any means. I think I even said it in this video, or not this one, but the one I'm showing clips of. And I mean, it just somehow, man, I don't get it. That one's incorrect, but that one annoys me because I feel like, I mean, if I would have put the Cowboys in the barely make/miss playoffs category to start last season, people would have been, saying all kinds of stuff to me in the comments. Like, the Cowboys have an incredible defense. They had a great offense. They looked almost unstoppable all season long. And then you get in the playoffs and you lose to a year one quarterback. The dude's first full season starting. The Dolphins are one that I have really gone back and forth with as far as the top two tiers, whether it's Super Bowl contender or deep playoffs. Obviously, they have a great coach, and they design a lot of really fun plays with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You have Tua, who's put on a lot of muscle, honestly, since last year. I think trying to bulk up so he can kind of take those hits. But it's a real concern with him with his head injuries. I try not to predict injuries because I try not to predict as if players are going to get hurt, but sometimes it is a reality with certain players. And Tua, I think it is a real reality that he really struggled with head injuries last year. But I'm going to try and push that aside. As long as Tua stays healthy, that offense is the same. You bring in Jalen Ramsey on defense, and you got Bradley Chubb mid-year last year. I love it. You might even land Dalvin Cook as a running back too. I love the Dolphins. And I am going to put deep playoffs for them, but it is a matter of what's going to happen with Tua. I really hope he stays healthy, but it is definitely a scary situation. And then as far as the Dolphins go, this one, is a little bit like, it's not, I don't think it was the worst prediction in the world at that time. The Dolphins also had a pretty good season overall, but injuries really hurt them in the end, especially on the defensive side, specifically defensive line and edge and linebacker. They had a lot of injuries there. Tyreek was hurt for a time. Jalen Waddle, I believe, was hurt for a time. So it was kind of all over the place there. But, that one's wrong as well. Jaguars, I'm a big fan of, and this is going to be like my biggest kind of wild card crazy pick out there. But I am going to put the Jaguars in deep playoffs. I'm a believer in Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to lie. I loved what I saw from them last year. They come back down 27-0 at halftime to beat the Chargers. You go on against the Chiefs, and you honestly, you compete. You're just not good enough to beat them, but you do compete. Going into this year, though, you now have Calvin Ridley back, so that offense only gets better. Travis Etienne, you draft Tank Bigsby as the backup running back. You still have Trevor Lawrence, like I said, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. That offense is incredible. As you guys saw in that clip, I was pretty high on the Jaguars, probably more than other people, probably other than Jaguars fans going into last year. I really thought Trevor Lawrence was going to make another jump, and you have, you bring in Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne, you draft, Tank Bigsby, you have Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. I really just thought it was all going to kind of come together a bit better than what it did. They were still a fine team, but not as high as I was kind of assuming they would kind of make it. I think the Vikings offense is Super Bowl level, and their defense is like barely missed the playoffs level. I don't love the Vikings defense at all, but you do still have Harrison Smith, you have Marcus Davenport, you have Daniel Hunter, and then you also got Byron Murphy, which is honestly pretty solid, but it was very clear in that game against the Giants last year that defense needed some work, and they are working on it. Then next is the Vikings. So this one's pretty interesting. So in the clip, you actually, and I'm a little annoyed with myself that I got this wrong, because in the clip I say that while their offense is amazing, their defense is not near as the same level. But despite that, I'm going to pick them to go to the deep playoffs. But in reality, their defense is actually better than I thought, but injuries on offense hurt their overall season, and they obviously didn't go to the deep playoffs. So I feel like this pick may have been accurate had the offensive stayed healthy. It just wasn't the way that I thought they would get there is how it could have happened, if that makes sense. The defense surprised me for sure. I was wrong about that. But overall, it's tough. You have Jefferson hurt, Kirk Cousins goes down for the year, and the Viking season kind of goes all over the place after that. But yeah, so that one again is incorrect. Really make the playoffs. I think definitely a bigger year for them. And I talked about this once again in my Lamar Jackson video. You have a new offensive coordinator, gonna be passing the ball more. Lamar has probably the best weapons he's had in his entire career now. You have Mark Andrews, you draft Zay Flowers, you have Rashad Bateman back and healthy, you have J.K. Dobbins. I mean, you have a phenomenal offense. You have, honestly, I thought a phenomenal defense too. I just think that's just so competitive, and Lamar, quite frankly, does not have the best playoff track history. So I think he's a great quarterback, and I think they will have a good year. As far as the playoffs go, I don't know. I think they get in, but I'm not sure how far they go after that. Next is the Ravens. This one is correct. They did go to the deep playoffs. They actually made it to the AFC Championship. From that clip, I did put them in the barely make/miss playoffs. At the end of the video, though, you guys go check if you want to as well, if you don't believe me. I did move them up to deep playoffs. I felt that I ranked them too low at first in that video. I kind of moved them at the end, which I try to do in all my tier list videos, because I try and keep it pretty fluid, and at the end, if I feel I incorrectly ranked something, I move it up. And honestly, I don't know why I didn't rank them that high to begin with in that video, because they, I think, were kind of a lock to be at least, you know, better than barely missed playoffs, I guess. So, you know, whatever. The 49ers, I like a lot going into this year. I actually did a video on their whole quarterback situation right now with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance and Sam Darnold. Obviously, their defense absolutely incredible. So, in my opinion, the 49ers are a Super Bowl contender. 100%. I think they could have been there if Brock Purdy didn't get hurt. I'm not saying they would have beat the Eagles, but it definitely would have been way more of a game than what it was. And then going to the Super Bowl, 49ers, you know, this one I think was kind of on the money, I guess. I mean, I don't think this is very hard to predict. I had this all back in July in the comments of the video that I'm showing clips from. I even said the 49ers were my early pick to go to the Super Bowl. So I just kind of had them as a favorite coming out of the NFC. A lot of people did. It's not really that crazy of a prediction. It was kind of, they were one of the favorites anyways, but that one is at least correct. Now, the bad things is their defense. They did lose both starting safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. And even if you're a Bengals fan, you have to acknowledge that is not good. You never want to lose two of your starting safeties in the same offseason. That's just, you know, not good, like I said. But I think overall, the Bengals are a great team. The one thing they have going for them is they do have Dax Hill, who they drafted the year prior, for safety, so he can fill at least one of those spots. I'm honestly not sure who their other one is to replace Von Bell, because I believe Jesse Bates replaced Dax Hill, but could be wrong there. But I think overall, the Bengals have a great defensive scheme, and their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, is phenomenal. So I do think they're still a Super Bowl contender, but they're going to need some help in that secondary. Someone's going to have to step up, and I'm sure someone will, like Kieran Taylor-Britt. Then next is the Bengals, and so this one's tough. The Bengals had some injuries from really the start to the end of their year, especially Joe Burrow, who's hurt. T. Higgins was hurt for a time. And, you know, I don't know why I still thought they would make Super Bowl, or at least the Super Bowl contender tier, after losing both your starting safeties, you know, because I mentioned that, but I guess I just assumed despite that, the offense would kind of compensate for it. But, you know, with this, you're in a very tough division, losing two starting safeties. I mean, it was already, the odds were stacked against you a little bit for a Super Bowl. You know, the Bills were healthy, who knows what would have happened, but, you know, unfortunately they weren't, and they were not Super Bowl contenders last season, so that one is incorrect. The narrative for the Bills and Josh Allen kind of started to, like, shift last year whenever they started to struggle, and then it was like, oh, are they overrated? Oh, are they this? And then they go to the playoffs to get stomped at home, and it was just a very unfortunate end of the season. Josh Allen dealing with like that elbow injury. They lost defensive guys early in the year, like Micah Hyde, and then they lose Von Miller. So they were not 100%. I think the Bills' hate is grossly over the top, and you know, you're never hated that much unless you have something going right, and the Bills had a lot of stuff going right, and that's why they got so much hate, because they were starting to crumble. I think they bounce back this year and have a great year. The Bills, I mean, at one point, you know, obviously this season, they weren't going to make the playoffs. I think with like 3 or 4 weeks left, they were out of it. They kind of had a very strong finish to their season. You make the playoffs, you win a game, but you just can't get over the roadblock that is the Chiefs in the playoffs, unfortunately. Again, in that clip, I thought that they were going to kind of overcome the Buffalo hate that almost kind of became a thing last season whenever they struggled a bit. I think they definitely did. They proved people wrong that were counting them out throughout last season. And unfortunately, they just couldn't do much more than that in the playoffs other than beating the Steelers. So, not a Super Bowl contender, but they did actually save the second half of their season for sure. I mean, I'm not sure how much time I'm going to spend on this, to be honest with you. They have Patrick Mahomes, you know, Travis Kelce, Super Bowl contenders. I mean, I'm not sure what else I'm really supposed to say at this point. Like, everybody knows Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. Travis Kelce's like a cheat code at tight end. You know, they have a young secondary that played honestly pretty well. Ended up winning a Super Bowl last season. Isaiah Pacheco looks great on offense. And the Chiefs, I kept this one pretty short and sweet. Mahomes and Kelce, not much else to say about it. That's kind of what I said in the clip. That's just because that's how I felt. You know, it's just kind of like that legendary quarterback, wide receiver, tight end duo. You know, you can't count them out. And that's exactly what happened. Amazing defense, too. Big credit to the defense. I didn't really talk about that a whole lot in the video. I think I underestimated Chiefs defense just a little bit. I know in my defensive tier list video, I think I gave the Chiefs an A tier going into next year, last season, if that makes sense. Didn't mention it in that clip, though, but yeah, that one's correct. Super Bowl champions. They're going to go in Super Bowl contender. They did lose, honestly, a decent amount of guys on defense, but they drafted incredibly well with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. And then you also get DeAndre Swift as your running back. So that offense only getting better, in my opinion. I don't think Miles Sanders would even do that again, like what he just did this year. This year. Don't think he replicates that 2 years in a row, so I think it was a good idea to kind of move on from him. And then finally, the Eagles. You know, this one's tough. I really thought the Eagles had the potential there. I think the coaching changes really messed him up a little bit. Jalen Hurts was not his best at all. Down the stretch, they just started to really struggle, especially the secondary on that defense. But I would attribute a lot of that to coaching. I think it just was not, and that was not the same offense we saw in the Super Bowl the year prior at all. I mean, that was just really bad. I think that was Brian Johnson was the offensive coordinator. I didn't like a lot of his play calling. And then, yeah, so that was just, they kind of imploded after week 12 or 11, whatever it was, and they got bounced first round. So they were not Super Bowl contenders. And that is it for this. So adding this up, not counting the teams on the bubble, I got 11 correct, which is around, we're just going to round to like the nearest whole percent, like 34%. If we count the bubble teams, which to be fair, I'm going to count them because it was accurate. Like, yes, the Colts, no, not the Colts. Yes, the Broncos did barely miss the playoffs, but they also were around 5, 7, 8 wins. So, 5, 7 wins. They had 8 wins. So, they were right in there. So, if we count that, then I had 14 correct, which is 44%. So, if you want to give me credit on either one of those, that's up to you. But basically, I was somewhere between 34 and 44% correct for picking the 2023 NFL season for each team. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. There were a lot of surprises, like the Texans, the Buccaneers, the Rams. The Giants did not live up to the expectations. And then you kind of had some of the just injuries, like the Jets. That was a really big one. I would even count the Vikings, to be honest, as well, as a big team full of injuries that year. And then the Panthers that I was just delusional about, I guess. But yeah, so I'll take that, to be honest. I would love to increase that after this coming season's prediction. But yeah, so let me know down below, guys, what your favorite team did this past year, what you want to see them do this year. Now that rookie mini camp's officially underway, it's kind of getting to be the off season. Training camp's been coming up in a couple months, so almost back to the NFL season. Thanks for watching. I do really appreciate it. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. I would really appreciate that. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, which is crazy to say. So yeah, appreciate all the support. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.